The night was cold, too cold for the air to feel like anything but punishment. Wind scraped through the empty structures of the outpost like it was trying to erase them. Metal groaned where it had warped from years of storms and neglect, and dust choked the spaces where people used to live, laugh, survive. Now only silence echoed. Silence and the faint sound of something breathing, slow, tired, barely holding on. They had been left behind. The colony was called Requiem Station once, back when it still mattered. Back when it was a frontier post in the Vega Drift, designed to be a spark of civilization in the wild. But supply lines failed, communications broke down, leadership moved on. And then, one day, without fanfare or explanation, the ship stopped coming. The last official transmission was short, a sterile voice over static. All assets have been redirected. Survival is at the discretion of local command. Translation: you're on your own. That was 12 years ago. The few who remained did what they could, patched old systems, rationed food until they were measuring out powdered nutrition by the gram, and recycled every drop of water. They kept the lights on, sort of. They kept the illusion of order. But deep down, everyone knew the truth. They weren't a colony anymore. They were ghosts waiting to fade. No one knew how many had died in the first few years. People just stopped showing up for rotations. Some vanished into the drift wastes, chasing rumors of abandoned mining sites. Others ended it quietly, leaving behind notes scrawled on whatever they could find. And some, the most broken, simply sat still until the cold took them. The children stopped playing. The engineers stopped repairing. Hope became something whispered, then mocked, then forgotten. But then came the light. A signal. Weak, distorted, but unmistakably human, cut through the static one morning just before dawn. The broadcast was raw, a voice trembling but alive. I don't know if anyone can hear this, but I found them. The lost ones. They're alive, and they need help. It wasn't from Requiem. That much was clear. The accent was different. The energy in the voice was too fresh, too determined, like someone who hadn't learned to give up yet. At first, most of Requiem's survivors dismissed it. Some even got angry, like hope was an insult. But one of them, a woman named Lyra, refused to look away. She was a mechanic, or had been, back when the word still meant something. Now she was just another face covered in grease and scars, trying to keep the water pumps running. But when she heard that voice, something sparked in her chest that hadn't burned in years. It sounded like Earth. Not just the planet, but the feeling. Of beginnings. Of belief. Lyra dug up an old receiver, barely functional, rusted around the eye ports, and spent 3 nights rebuilding it from scavenged parts. She rerouted power from the lighting grid, sacrificing warmth for signal strength. And when she finally locked onto the direction of the broadcast, her heart nearly stopped. It wasn't just some lost kid with a transmitter. It was a ship. Not military, not corporate, just a single-person craft, modified beyond reason, crawling toward the drift with no support, no backup, and barely enough shielding to survive the cold. But it was real, and it was human. The pilot's name was Cam. No rank. No assignment, just a name and a mission that made no sense to anyone at Requiem. Find the abandoned, bring them home. They thought he was crazy. Some still do. But Cam had something none of them remembered how to carry. He had purpose. He told them stories through broken comms and fragile satellite links about other places, other people. Not cities, not shining colonies, but other survivors. Forgotten outposts just like Requiem. People who held on long enough for someone to reach them. He spoke of a growing network, unauthorized, underground, where ordinary humans shared knowledge, supplies, even hope, without waiting for the corporations or the governments to remember them. And then, for the first time in 12 years, he landed. The docking bay hadn't been used since the last dropship left. Lyra was there waiting, her breath fogging in the frozen air. When the hatch opened, she didn't know what she expected. Maybe a soldier, maybe a lie. But Cam looked ordinary. Worn boots, dirt under his fingernails, a jacket patched more times than it was whole. His first words, "You guys look terrible." And then he smiled. That night, the survivors of Requiem sat in a circle around an old heater as Cam passed out nutrition packs that weren't expired and shared a data drive loaded with music, news, and personal video messages from other outposts. People just like them, faces filled with warmth, laughter, stories, evidence that the galaxy hadn't forgotten them after all. Lyra watched the others react. The quiet ones cried, the bitter ones looked away. But even they couldn't ignore it. Not this time, because Cam didn't just bring supplies, he brought a connection. And connections, real ones, were harder to break than steel. But not everything about Cam was what it seemed. There was something in the way he avoided certain questions. Something tight in his posture when he mentioned Earth. Lyra noticed it, so did a few others. He wasn't just traveling for the sake of kindness. He was running from something, or toward it. The signal he'd followed to Requiem, he hadn't found it by accident. It wasn't just a call for help. It was a voice from his past. Someone he'd known, someone he'd lost, and whatever dragged him across half the drift to find Requiem. It wasn't over yet, because the next morning, as Cam prepped his ship to scan nearby coordinates, the proximity alarm triggered. A ship was coming, not a rescue, not a supply run, and definitely not friendly. Lyra stared at the incoming ID tag on the cracked screen. It wasn't corporate, it wasn't Kravex, it was something else. Something that hadn't shown up on colony charts for over 20 years. Cam paled the second he saw it. He whispered one word, barely audible. "They found me," and that was when everything changed. Cam didn't speak for a long moment after those words left his mouth. The air inside the control room felt heavier, like it was pressing down on everyone watching. Lyra looked at him carefully. His jaw was locked, eyes scanning the approaching vessel's ID signature again and again, like he expected it to change. It didn't. The readings were clear. The ship heading their way wasn't large, but it had tech that didn't belong to any known organization. No emblem. No broadcast codes. Just that cold, steady glide toward Requiem's orbit. Silent. Fast. Deliberate. Lyra stepped closer, trying to see what he saw. "You want to tell me who they are?" she asked quietly. Cam rubbed his hands together, like he was waking himself up from a bad dream. "They're not supposed to know I came here. I wiped everything. Flight logs, signal bounces, even the relay echoes." He shook his head. "But I guess some shadows are longer than you think." That wasn't a real answer. Lyra could tell, but she didn't push, yet. Instead, she turned her focus to the terminal and began pulling up defense grid diagnostics. Most of the systems were offline or barely functional. No weapons, no shields, and no hope of surviving a direct assault if this unknown vessel turned hostile. Cam moved suddenly, pushing past her and heading toward the docking bay. "I need to make a call." "To who?" she asked, following him, uneasy. "To the reason I came here," he said without looking back. Down in the lower levels of the outpost, where most had stopped venturing years ago, Cam found what he was looking for: a deep-range comms booster tucked into a wall panel, buried beneath layers of dust and forgotten hardware. Lyra watched as he set a small device into the cradle and entered a passcode. The machine clicked on with a low hum, flickering to life, and then a voice came through, faint, garbled, female. "Cam, is that you?" Lyra recognized the voice. It was the same one from the original signal that brought Cam here in the first place. Only now it sounded older. Tired, like whoever it belonged to had been speaking into the void for far too long. "I found them, Jules," Cam said. "Requiem, they're alive. They're barely hanging on, but they're here." The voice cracked with emotion. I told you they wouldn't all be gone." Lyra leaned in slightly. "Who is she?" Cam hesitated, then answered softly. "Juliana. She used to be stationed here before the cutoff. She was part of a research team monitoring early terraforming failures in the outer sectors. She got reassigned before everything fell apart. Thought this place was lost forever, but last year she caught a trace signal. something buried in old data streams. That was enough for me. Lyra frowned. You left everything behind just to follow a signal? Cam met her eyes. She's my sister. The room went quiet. Lyra backed off, trying to process that. Cam hadn't just been out here helping strangers. He'd been searching for family. And now, with this other ship approaching, everything was starting to feel less random, more like a trap or a test. Juliana's voice returned, more urgent now. Cam, listen to me. If they followed your trail, you need to get out now. You don't know what they'll do if they find Requiem. I'm not running again, he said. You don't understand. These people don't care about survivors. They want silence. They want erasure. Lyra stepped in then. Who are they? Juliana hesitated. Blackout Division. Old Earth. Project. Supposed to be shut down decades ago. But they're still out there. Quiet. Cleaners mostly. If they think this outpost saw something it wasn't supposed to, they'll wipe it from existence. Lyra felt her stomach turn. We didn't see anything. Juliana's voice dropped. You don't have to. The signal cut. Cam stood still for a second, then turned to Lyra. I didn't come here to bring danger to your people. But you did, she replied. He nodded. I did, and I'm sorry. But I'm not leaving. Outside, the ship drew closer. No hails, no communication, just movement. Requiem had no way to defend itself, no escape ships, no functioning drones. Just a fading colony of tired souls and a single human who had dared to bring a spark of hope. Cam rushed to his ship and began offloading more gear, portable sensors, energy barriers, and a box marked simply Ecosystems. He handed it to Lyra. We need to wake the others. Tell them to prepare for lockdown. I'll try to stall them. Maybe I can talk them down. You think they'll listen to reason? No, he admitted, but I think they'll listen to proof. That confused her. What kind of proof? Cam hesitated, then opened a hidden compartment beneath the control panel of his ship. Inside was a cryostasis unit, small, compact, and active. Through the glass was a child, no older than 10. Lyra froze. Who is that? Another survivor, Cam said quietly. From another outpost, one they did erase. I pulled her out just before their cleanup team arrived. She remembers everything. And if they know that, if they see she's still alive, they'll hesitate. They'll have to. Lyra stared at the girl in disbelief. You've been carrying her this whole time? She's the reason I started this, and suddenly everything made more sense. Cam wasn't just helping because it was the right thing. He was helping because he couldn't save everyone before. He'd failed once, and he wasn't going to let it happen again. Outside, alarms began to blare. The unknown ship had entered atmosphere. Its shape cut through the clouds like a blade, sleek, matte black, silent. No lights, no windows, just purpose. The people of Requiem gathered in the upper halls, peering through cracked windows and broken panels, watching the ghost ship descend. Some had fear in their eyes. Others just looked tired, ready for whatever came next. Lyra stood beside Cam at the entrance to the docking bay, the child's stasis unit powered down to minimum visibility. They watched as the ship hovered over the landing pad, then lowered a single ramp, and a figure stepped out, not armored, not armed, just human, pale, sharp features, eyes like glass. He said nothing. Cam stepped forward. The figure lifted a hand, and everything around them, lights, systems, even Cam's ship, flickered, then died. Not from damage, but from command. Somewhere in that stillness, the colony of Requiem held its breath, waiting, watching, and hoping, somehow, that the human who changed, everything wasn't too late. The stillness after the power died wasn't quiet, it was loaded. A weight fell over Requiem, like the whole outpost was holding in a breath it didn't know how to let go. Without power, even the recycled air seemed thinner, the cold creeping in faster than usual. Cam stood in the shadow of the docking bay, muscles tight, watching the figure that had stepped out of the blackout ship. The man wasn't bulky like a soldier. He wasn't trying to intimidate with size or armor. He was calm, collected, dressed in smooth, dark material that shimmered oddly in the low light, like it absorbed attention as much as it absorbed energy. Cam knew this tactic. No sudden moves, no shouting, just presence. It was how the division operated. They didn't scare you the way monsters did. They made you question what you knew. They made you doubt everything about your choices until they convinced you to hand over whatever they wanted. Information, resources, people. The man took a step forward. Lyra instinctively raised the old plasma tool she'd brought, even though she knew it wouldn't work now. No power. Still, the grip gave her a strange sense of control. "I'm looking for a fugitive," the man said. His voice was clear, no distortion, no accent, neutral in a way that felt artificial. Designation: Cam Loran. Unauthorized operations across restricted sectors. Theft of government property. Harboring protected data. Cam didn't move. "You left out the part where I saved lives." "That's not your job," the man said flatly. Lyra looked at Cam. "They're here for you." He nodded once, not denying it. "But this isn't about me anymore," he said, loud enough for the figure to hear. "You're not just here to arrest someone. You're here because this colony is proof that Earth left people behind, that they lied about it." The man's expression didn't change. That was the past. The past is classified. Lyra stepped forward. "These people aren't data points. We're human beings. We've survived more than you can imagine." The figure's eyes finally shifted to her. "That's exactly why you're dangerous." It hit her hard, how easy it was for people like this to erase whole places with words. Dangerous, irregular, unstable. Labels that stripped you of identity and gave them permission to remove you from the equation. Not even malicious, just efficient. Meanwhile, in the upper levels, word spread through the colony like a fever. Some people wanted to hide. Others whispered about fighting back. But the truth was, there was nothing left to fight with. No weapons. No working defenses. Just rust, fear, and a glimmer of hope carried in the form of a small girl in cryosleep. Oren, one of the oldest survivors, an engineer who had been a teenager when the last official ship left, stood by a cracked observation window. He watched the blackout ship with narrowed eyes. He remembered stories his father used to tell, about the shadow programs, about the disappearances no one ever explained. Oren had buried those stories like everyone else, but now they stood outside, his home. He turned to a small group of younger survivors, including a girl named Mina, who had been born on Requiem and never seen anything beyond its crumbling walls. "They're not going to let us stay," Oren said quietly. "Even if we do nothing, they'll clean this place." Mina frowned. "Why? We're not hurting anyone." "Because surviving makes them look bad," he said. "Because if we prove that people can live without them, it means they failed." Down at the dock, Cam moved slowly toward the cryo unit. "You want to shut this place down? Fine. But you need to see something first." The man didn't stop him. Maybe he wanted to see. Maybe he thought it was a bluff. Cam lifted the unit, turned it slightly, and revealed the child inside. She was from Colony Eltari 3. You remember that place? You said it was destroyed in a tectonic collapse. Uninhabitable. No survivors. The man didn't blink. "Well," Cam continued, "this is Jenna. She was there, and she remembers the blackout team that came to secure the facility. She remembers the people who were still alive when you showed up, and she remembers watching them disappear." Lyra's heart pounded. There was something in Cam's voice that made her believe him completely. It wasn't just that he had the girl. It was the way he said her name, like someone who had promised to protect her no matter what. The figure's lips pressed together. "That memory won't hold up in review. She's a child." Cam didn't let up. "But she's also evidence, and if you take her, I'll make sure her story gets out." The outposts I've connected with more than you know, they'll hear about this. We may not be official, but we're loud. The man stepped forward. And if I take you instead, you'll still lose, Cam said. Because I'm not the only one doing this. You silence me. Another voice will rise. People are tired of being forgotten. For a long moment, the man said nothing. Then, without warning, he turned and walked back toward his ship. Cam stared after him, confused. Wait, what are you doing? The man stopped at the base of the ramp. Running a protocol. What kind of protocol? Lyra asked. He glanced back. Containment. The ship hummed again, and deep beneath the colony, something groaned. It wasn't natural. It sounded like metal being pulled from its bolts. Lyra turned to Cam. They're not just erasing us. They're going to bury us. Cam's face went pale. They're going to collapse the entire outpost from underneath. No record, no structure, just a crater. Up above, Oren felt the vibrations under his boots. Dust shook loose from the ceiling. Pipes moaned. Time's up, he muttered. All over Requiem, people began moving, grabbing supplies, waking children, heading toward the lower tunnels that Cam's map had opened. If they couldn't fight, they could at least run. But there was no guarantee that even the tunnels were safe. Cam looked at Lyra, at the cryo unit, at the people scrambling behind them, and he made a decision. You said you had no escape ships, he said. But you still have the old drilling pods, right? The ones they used to use for core samples? Lyra blinked. Those things haven't been touched in years. They don't have to fly, Cam said. They just need to move. Where? Down. Away from the surface. There's a lava-formed sub-pocket under the ridge. If we can get everyone there, we can ride out whatever they're planning. Lyra's mind raced. And then what? Cam met her eyes. Then we make a choice. Either rebuild again, or let the galaxy see what happens when humans refuse to disappear. And outside, the ship rose slowly into the air, engines glowing dim and patient, like it wasn't in a rush. Didn't need to be. It had already started the countdown. The grinding beneath the colony kept getting louder, more urgent, like the planet itself was warning them to run. Requiem wasn't built to last this long, and whatever protocol the Blackout Division had activated was tearing it apart from the roots. Cam's boots hit the steel floor hard as he sprinted toward the old drilling bay. Lyra was already there, shouting commands to two teenagers trying to fire up the old core pod consoles. Sparks flew from an exposed panel. The machines coughed but didn't catch. They're dead, one of the boys yelled. Keep trying, Lyra snapped. Just give me enough juice to open the stabilizers. We don't need a clean ride. We need one that doesn't fall apart in the first 10 seconds. Cam dropped the cryo unit beside her. Jenna still slept inside, unaware that the future of an entire colony now hinged on seconds, on whether their escape tunnel held, on whether the blackout ship hovering above would stop once Requiem fell silent, or if it would track the survivors wherever they went. There were too many questions. Not enough time. The ceiling above them cracked with a sharp, sickening pop. Concrete dust rained down in the corridor. The tremors were stronger now. Oren's voice crackled over the static-filled comm system. We're losing stability on the West Dome. That whole wing's coming down in under 5 minutes. You've got maybe 10 before the whole outpost caves. Cam turned to the group gathering near the drilling pods. Dozens of faces, scared but holding together. Parents, gripping children. Older survivors carrying storage crates full of salvaged water and nutrient packs. They all looked to him like he had a plan, like this wasn't just a desperate gamble. We've got one shot, he said, raising his voice. Once we launch the pods, we can't turn back. You'll be underground, no signal, no guarantees, but it's safer than staying up here. One woman stepped forward. Her name was Sarah. Cam remembered her from the first day he arrived. Tough, sharp-tongued, always the first to speak her mind. And then what? She asked. What do we do down there? Just hide and hope they forget us? No, Cam said. We survive. We wait it out and then we come back. We rebuild. Rebuild what? Someone else called out. Proof. Cam answered. That we're still here. That they didn't win. There was silence, then slow nods. Not full of hope, but full of something close. Something human. The lights flickered once, then roared to life. One of the teens yelled in shock. "We got power!" Lyra pushed past him and began inputting the coordinates to the lava shelf beneath the eastern ridge. It was risky. The heat could crack the pods, but it was their only shot at surviving the collapse. She looked at Cam. "You're sure about this location?" "I mapped it myself," he said. "It's the only hollow space strong enough to hold this many people." Just then the floor tilted. The whole bay groaned as metal supports shifted. The blackout ship had begun activating seismic charges, tiny destabilizers that would shake Requiem apart from within without a single visible explosion. Surgical erasure, no debris, no evidence. "We're out of time," Lyra said, locking the first pod door. "Start loading." They moved fast now. Cam lifted the cryo unit into the lead pod and locked it in place. Lyra coordinated groupings, small clusters of families, solo riders in between to balance weight. The drilling pods were narrow and crammed, but it didn't matter. They just needed to hold long enough. Up above, the blackout ship pulsed with energy. Cam could feel it in his bones, a deep vibration that made his teeth hurt. They were charging something. Not a weapon in the traditional sense. Something worse. Something that would turn Requiem into dust and silence. Cam grabbed his comm and switched to the emergency band. "Juliana, if you're out there, now's the time." For a long second, static. Then, "I'm here. I've got your signal. Cam, they're activating a full cascade. They're going to fold the entire region into itself." "How much time do we have?" "Minutes, maybe less. But I've got something too. I've been broadcasting since I saw their ship." Someone answered. Cam froze. "Who?" Juliana's voice dropped. "Another colony. One of ours. They've been listening, and they're sending a message to Blackout now." Cam's mind reeled. "You're saying we're not alone?" "Not anymore," she said. But whether that help would arrive in time was another question entirely. The last of the pods sealed shut. Only one remained, Cam and Lyra's. He turned to her. "You sure about this?" Lyra smirked, sweat clinging to her hairline. "I've lived through 10 winters in this place. I'm not dying in a cave-in." They climbed in together as the dock started to fracture. The pod hissed as it sealed, then rattled violently as the launcher beneath them activated. Cam reached for the control panel, heart hammering, and slammed the ignition. The pod dropped like a stone. Screams echoed through the metal chamber as gravity took hold. The other pods had already launched, disappearing one by one into the earth. Below, the sound was deafening. Steel shrieking, the world cracking apart above them. But it was the silence that followed that truly shook them, because the moment Requiem's surface caved in, everything above them went quiet. No alarms, no movement, just darkness, and the feeling that something irreversible had just happened. As their pod drilled deeper into the planet's crust, Cam pressed his hand against the stasis unit holding the girl. Jenna slept peacefully, untouched by the chaos above. Lyra stared straight ahead. "Do you think they'll come after us?" Cam didn't answer right away. His voice, when it came, was low and hard. "Only if they know we survived. And if they do, then they'll learn something they weren't ready for." Lyra turned to him. "What's that?" "That humans don't disappear so easy." The pod eventually stopped shaking, just a dull, final thud like a heart finally settling after a sprint. Cam didn't say anything at first. He just sat still, listening. The silence was thick and total, but it wasn't empty. There was breath. Lyra's, his own. The faint hum of Jenna's cryo chamber still running. Power held. They were alive. Lyra unstrapped herself and moved carefully. The pod's inner lights glowed dim orange, casting soft shadows across the curved metal walls. She reached for the hatch release but hesitated. Do you think they'll be waiting up there? Cam looked at the blinking console. No, there's no up there anymore. Requiem's gone. Whatever wasn't crushed probably got vaporized. We're under it now. The hatch released with a hiss. Warm air poured in, thick and rich with the scent of rock and mineral and something else. Life. A faint breeze stirred the edge of Cam's coat as he stepped out into the chamber. It was massive. A natural cavern with walls carved smooth by ancient lava flows. The other pods were scattered around, already opened. Survivors moved in slow motion, blinking, coughing, hugging. Some wept, not from fear but from the overwhelming realization that they'd made it. Children clung to parents. Old faces looked around in disbelief. Oren limped toward Cam, his shoulder bandaged but his eyes sharp. We counted. 74 made it. That's including the little one. Cam nodded, his throat tight. That's more than I expected. Lyra stepped beside him. Still less than we hoped. But no one asked about the others, not out loud. That part of the story would live in glances and quiet moments later. For now, survival was enough. As the hours passed, they organized what they had. Rations were inventoried, power cells carefully monitored, and temporary shelters formed using pod panels and stored fabric. It wasn't comfortable, but it was shelter. It was human. People began to speak again, softly at first. Then laughter came in small bursts. Nervous but real. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were recovering. Juliana's voice crackled over the emergency band sometime in the third hour. Cam, you down there? He grabbed his comm and stepped toward a natural opening that rose like a chimney, allowing signal to seep through. We're here. She sounded breathless. We picked up the seismic collapse. Their ship's gone, no heat trace, just vanished. But the message I told you about, it worked. The colony at Delta Fold got it. They're forwarding it across the Outland Circuit. Cam looked out at the makeshift community starting to rebuild in that glowing underground haven. So people know now. They do. Cam, you're not the only one anymore. There are others. Some of them had similar encounters. They're listening. Lyra joined him and leaned in. Ask her how long we've got before blackout shows up again. Juliana didn't wait for the question. There's movement across 3 sectors. Divisions pulling back. I think you scared them. Us? Cam asked, surprised. You proved they couldn't erase everything. They tried, and you're still here. Cam let that settle in. Then he switched off the comm and turned back toward the others. No one was watching him. They were busy, boiling water, sealing containers, laying out plans. But they felt different, stronger. The weight that had hung over Requiem for decades was gone. Not forgotten, but finally lifted. Later that night, he sat by the cryo unit, fingers resting on the edge of the panel. Jenna slept peacefully, her tiny chest rising and falling inside the pod. Lyra sat nearby, her knees drawn up, eyes scanning the cavern like she could already see where the future tunnels might be. Do you think she'll remember any of this? She asked. Cam shook his head. Probably not, but maybe that's for the best. She deserves better than all this. We all do, he said quietly. Lyra tilted her head. You ever think about just disappearing? Starting somewhere, fresh, away from all of it? He nodded slowly. I used to, but I think maybe now's the time to stay. Help people remember who we are, what we fought for. She didn't say anything, but she didn't argue either. Days passed, then weeks. The cavern slowly turned into something more permanent. Gardens were started using salvaged hydroponic kits. Cam worked on transmitting reports through the rock shaft, logging everything, names, losses, discoveries. Not just for data, but for legacy. People needed to know the truth, that Earth had turned its back, but not everyone stayed down. And word came back. Messages trickled in from colonies thought long abandoned, from human settlements in fringe sectors, hiding in silence for years. Requiem became more than a cautionary tale. It became a rally point. In time, The girl in the cryo unit woke. Her eyes opened slowly, uncertain, confused. Lyra was there first, speaking softly, telling her she was safe. Jenna didn't remember much, bits and pieces. But the one thing she clung to was Cam's voice. She remembered the way he used to talk to her while she slept, stories about Earth, about stars, about second chances. She asked if the stars were real. Cam smiled and pointed upward to the faint shaft of light filtering through the cavern ceiling. They're real. And one day, you'll see them again. In the end, Requiem didn't become a ghost, it became a foundation. The place they launched from, not with ships, but with stories, truth, and proof that survival wasn't enough. That being human meant building, remembering, and fighting for those who had no voice left. And even though the world above had tried to forget them, they made sure it never could again.